Welcome back to the show. Well, it's more than 2 months now since Michael Gove introduced the Renters Reform Bill. It was brought into Parliament in order to protect tenants in the housing market. Many landlords feel the bill puts extra burdens on their businesses. But the last week, the Levelling Up Secretary has said private landlords are vital to the private rental sector. So which is it? Do landlords have a part to play in the housing market? And how do we solve the record numbers of people living in temporary accommodation? Well, to answer that, I'm joined by a couple who started to pile into the housing market just as everybody else was running out of it. Leanne and Graeme Carling bought their first rental property in the middle of the financial crash of 2007-2008. Welcome to the show. Really pleased to have you on the show today. And I suppose I just wanted to ask whether you believe, as landlords, whether you have a vital role to play in the housing market, as Michael Gove has said.
Well, thanks for having us on, Arlene. I do think that, and I do believe that landlords do play a huge part in the housing crisis, because we do provide safe, affordable accommodation for renters. But with the changes, etc., that are coming into play, landlords are being squeezed.
Yeah, and we're told today that over 100,000 people are in temporary accommodation. That's basically in hotels and hostels. And that's the highest since records have begun in 1998. Surely there's a role for people like yourselves to try and make sure that, as well as social houses, there are houses for people to move into.
Yeah, I think that's an incredible amount of temporary accommodation, people in temporary accommodation, and I think that's what we've seen over the years since we've been involved. Back in 2007 and 8, there has been a squeeze. There's such a squeeze in terms of the regulation, taxation, the legislation around landlords that actually, if you just look at the numbers, it's a very difficult investment for anybody that would even be minded to get into it. So what you're seeing is a slow exodus. I say slow because these rules have been coming in for the last 10 years. Of course, a number of the new policies that they're talking about bringing in England have been in play in Scotland for a number of years. So what we've seen has been a quiet, if you like, where some of the larger landlords have just simply exited by selling their properties. That has reduced the amount for rent, leaving less available for people to rent, and therefore you're seeing this increase in temporary accommodation.
Yeah. And one of the Gove recommendations is that you will be able to turn shops in the high streets and takeaways and betting shops and what have you into living spaces again. I mean, do you think that's a good idea, Graeme and Leanne? Do you think that's something that will help open up the market?
Yeah, definitely. But I'll tell you, that's a lot easier said than done. Yeah. We've done that. We have converted empty buildings, schools, churches, hotels, pubs. We've done all that. The problem is the length of time that these developments or redevelopments take. Absolutely, it would make sense to repurpose some of these commercial properties that likely won't ever be, a pub again or a betting shop again or something, just because of or even banks that are moving on to online. So certainly it's certainly something that should be looked at. The problem we've found in doing those conversions has been in the planning, the length of planning, the cost of funds, and there's complications that come up when you go through that process. So it's not, to do a betting shop, convert it into 1 or 2 flats, for example, can take you 5 years. That's the problem.
Yeah. And those 5 years are presumably not down to the length of time it takes to do the physical work. It's all about the planning and the need to do that. And of course, the policy has changed, because it used to be that government and councils didn't want people living in towns and cities. They wanted them out in the suburbs. But there are so many empty spaces in our towns and villages now. Either shops are not open and the whole building is in need of renovation, or living over the shop seems to be something that doesn't happen anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the problem with some of these is that a number of banks or lenders, they frown upon, or it's part of their policy, that they won't lend to a property above a commercial, no matter what that is. You know, it doesn't have to be a kebab shop that can go on file. It can simply be an office. And but, you know, their policy is they just don't lend above commercial. Yeah, so that makes it more difficult. There is restrictions to borrowers who can actually, you know, go and borrow money from an institution to do that.
And if it's not the lenders that won't lend, there's higher insurance rates for properties above commercial units.
Yeah, so back to the banks again, which is something that we've been talking about, as you can imagine, on the show today. But I wanted to ask you, as entrepreneurs, as UK entrepreneurs, and as someone who took a risk, walked away from their jobs, decided they were going to do this for themselves, is the UK still a good place to be an entrepreneur, do you think?
I think it's certainly got a lot more difficult. There are. Well, put it this way. The answer is yes, because you know there will always be opportunities. So we are glass half full people, and we wouldn't be in business in the UK if we didn't think there was opportunities. But the question is, are there better places to be entrepreneurs and invest your money? Are there better countries that are more entrepreneurial focused? Absolutely, there is, and that's certainly what we found since we've been in business, and we have the opportunity to look at investments all over the place now. There are simply better opportunities, you know, out with the UK, and that's frustrating.
Yeah, I'm sure it is frustrating. And just finally, I know that one of the things you feel very strongly about is not just being an entrepreneur, but in giving back. And you've recently climbed base camp on Mount Everest. Tell us very briefly about what you did and who that was for.
Okay, so Graeme and I, all our married life, we've gave back to various charities that we've been passionate about for different reasons. Our daughter was diagnosed in 2008 with type 1 diabetes, and since then we've done a lot of fundraising for them. So in May this year we climbed Everest Base Camp to raise funds, and it was fantastic. So
for
JDRF in the UK.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you for doing that, and thanks very much for coming on the show today and telling us why you feel that you have a role to play in the housing market here in the UK. Thanks very much for coming on the show. Well, it was really good to hear there from Graeme and Leanne, and to hear about their journey as entrepreneurs here in the UK. But that's it for this hour. But I'll be back at 12 noon with more, including one of the lead claimants in a civil suit against the Department of Health over the contaminated blood scandal. Stay with us. Here's the weather.